Okay, so we are discussing this week's parsha, Chayey Sarah, the life of Sarah, and it's titled "The Life of Sarah," even though um, right in the beginning of the parsha, Sarah passes away, and the Torah, the first section of the Torah, this first section of the parsha, discusses Abraham's purchasing a plot of land to bury Sarah. That's known as the Cave of Machpelah, the double cave. It's in Hebron. I guess the first piece of real estate that Abraham purchased is for the burial place of his wife. And you have a little negotiation between Abraham and the locals. And at the end of the negotiation, Abraham purchases the land. And that's one, the opening scene. Then you have a very long section, I think it's 67 verses, which is very long, about Abraham dispatching his servant Eliezer to find a wife for his son. So Abraham says, go to his servant, go back to my birthplace, to Haran, which is sort of the border of Turkey and Iraq. And he says, go there to find a wife for my family. So Eliezer says, well, maybe the girl won't want to come. Maybe I should bring your son back there. He says, no, you can't bring my son back there, because the idea was that even though Abraham himself left Israel and Jacob left Israel, but Isaac was not supposed to leave Israel. And you see it in this story, and you also see later God tells that to Isaac. And the reason is because Isaac was considered holy like an offering, because he was offered as an offering at the binding of Isaac. So he's considered like an offering. And an offering, you're not supposed to take an offering out of a holy space, out of the temple or out of Jerusalem. So Isaac is supposed to remain in Israel, and that's what happens. So instead, Abraham dispatches the servant to find a wife. And you know the story with he's looking for a wife, he wants a kind girl, and he says to himself, well, if I go to God, please help me. If I find a girl, I'll ask her to give me water. If she gives me and the camels, then I know she's the one. And that is 67 verses in the Parsha, which is a tremendous amount. And that story is repeated at least twice, sometimes some of it three times. In other words, you have the plan, how Eliezer plans the story in his mind, what he's going to do. And then you have how the story unfolds, where he approaches Rebecca and he asks Rebecca for the water, and she gives him the water, and she gives the camels. And then you have how he goes to her family and retells them the story. So it's almost three times. His plan, how it happens, and how he repeats it. And that takes up a tremendous amount of the parsha. The end of the parsha is Abraham remarries, has other children, and at the end he passes away, and Ishmael and Isaac bury him. So there's what to talk about that as well, maybe tomorrow morning. But we want to focus tonight on the bulk of the parsha, which is the story of Eliezer finding the wife being dispatched to find the wife for Isaac, and specifically the question of the repetition. And nobody says it better than the Medrash. The Medrash asks a question, really, it's wonders. And the Medrash, responds to this issue, and you'll see in a minute what the Medrash says. I'm not sure it's an answer. In other words, it's an answer. It's an observation, but it's not an explanation. So the Medrash is going to answer something, and then all the commentaries are struggling to figure out what is the Medrash saying. So the Medrash makes an observation, which is supposed to be an explanation. Says the Medrash as follows: the sicha, which means the talking or the stories of the servants of the patriarchs, is yafeh, is more beautiful or better or more beautiful than the Torah of the children. So the children is the Jewish people. So in other words, the story of the patriarch's servants, Eliezer, is greater than the Torah of the Jewish people. How do you see it? So the Medrash continues, because the portion of Eliezer is repeated in the Torah twice, doubled. It's doubled in the Torah, the story of Eliezer. And then it says there are many bodies of the Torah, in other words, things that are integral to the Torah, that are just written with an allusion. Torah doesn't spell it out, just alludes to it. So many laws of the Torah are not written explicitly. They have to be derived from a reference, from an extra letter, from a connection, from the context. And that's what Talmud study is all about, to derive the meaning of the Torah, because it's not written explicitly, and you have to figure out what it means. So yet, when it comes to the Torah of the children, many important laws, bodies of the Torah, parts that are integral to the Torah, are only written with an allusion, like the laws of Shabbat. So the laws of Shabbat is a very important mitzvah. Shabbat, what does it mean? What Shabbat, you're not supposed to do work. What does that even mean? What is the definition of labor? So in the Talmud, there's 100 and something pages on this. How do you know it from the Torah? Well, there's one reference of how you figure out what is considered a piece of prohibited labor, from the juxtaposition of Shabbat to the building of the Mishkan. So you learn whatever is considered whatever labor is necessary to build the Mishkan is prohibited on Shabbat. So that's an example of a very important law of the Torah that is not explained explicitly in the Torah. And yet, when it comes to the story of the patriarchs, Torah just goes on and on and on. And it's doubles. So first of all, it's at great length, and it's doubled. So the Medrash says this teaches that the stories of the servants are more valuable, are more beautiful, maybe more important in some ways. And that's the Medrash's statement. Now the question is that an explanation, or is that an observation? Right? Yes, we see from this that the stories of the servants of the patriarchs are more valuable. The question is, why? How so? What could be more important than the Torah? What could be more important than the law, the body of the Torah? Okay, I understand you want to know the history, you want to know your origin story, you want to know where you come from, you want to know what your family history is. So you want to know how we got a wife, how Yitzchak married Rebecca. I think there are TV shows, are there, like How I Met Your Mom or How I Met Your Dad? So it's always interesting how Isaac met Rebecca. It's a nice story, but why does that have to be repeated twice? And meanwhile, the main important bodies of the Torah are not written explicitly. So that is the observation the Medrash says. The Medrash seems to explain it by saying it's more valuable, but the question, but I don't know if it's explained. Why is it indeed more valuable? So there are different interpretations. I'm going to give you for tonight, I think, a Hasidic interpretation. But in the meantime, of course, comments, questions, welcome. Otherwise, we go straight to the interpretation. So one of the things, before we answer this, we'll just introduce one more detail and then put all the pieces of the puzzle together. One interesting thing is that Eliezer prays to God, and he says, "Please help me." And Hakre, arrange that this should play out, that the right girl should show up, and I should ask, and then I'll ask her to give me water, and then she'll respond, I'll know she's the one. So Eliezer makes a plan. What a wonderful plan. And then when the Torah describes how the plan unfolds, there's a very interesting verse. I don't have the verse open in front of me, but the verse says, the man, the Ha'ish, Eliezer, so he asks her for water. She says, I'm going to give you water. She gives him water. Then she says, I'm also going to give the camels water. And she's feeding the camels. 10 camels is a lot of water. So it's a lot of work, and it's intense work. What is his response? So I would say, wow, he should be so confident. And of course, exactly what he said occurred. Isn't this a direct sign from heaven? Yet the verse describes him more than anything as surprised or in shock. The man is wondering. Eliezer is wondering. He's wondering to see, did God indeed make his path successful or not? So exactly, he makes this deal with Hashem, where he makes his prayer that I'm going to ask the girl, and if the girl offers me water, and then she offers and my camels, I know she's the one for Isaac. So obviously he thinks that's a good plan. And then the plan, he does it, he executes the plan. And the girl responds positively. So he should say Mazel Tov. But before he goes over to, by the way, he is very confident it's her. In other words, the verse describes how he goes up to her and he first gives her jewelry. And then he says, whom are you the daughter of? In other words, what family are you from? And she says, I'm the daughter of Betuel, the son of Nachor, and he knows that's Abraham's cousin. Nachor is Abraham's brother. So her father is Abraham's cousin. Her father is Isaac's cousin. So he knows that, yeah, he struck the one of all the girls. He asked the right one, Abraham's relative. But it's interesting, Rashi points out, And he first gives her the jewelry, then he asks, who are you? You would think logically it should be the reverse. First, he should ask her who she is. And once he knows who she is, he should give her the jewelry. So Rashi makes the point that he's confident that Hashem helped him and listened to his prayer and sent him the right girl. And it's interesting, and we can talk about this tomorrow, but it's interesting that when Eliezer retells the story to the family, he makes a few subtle changes. And one of the changes that he doesn't tell them what happened. He doesn't say, I first gave her jewelry, then I asked her which family she's from, because that's not logical. It's not a logical thing to do. They would say it's a strange thing. Instead, he changed the order and he says, I asked her, who are you the daughter of? She told me she's from Abraham's family. And then I gave her jewelry. So you see that the logical thing to do is to first ask her who she is and then give her the jewelry. And that's what he tells the family. But what he does, he's confident that Hashem helped his prayer and listened to his prayer and helped him be successful. And therefore, first he gives her the jewelry, and only then does he ask who she is. So if that's the case, why is he so surprised? And when he was watching this unfold, he says, the man is in wonder. He's in shock. He's curious. Did Hashem make me successful? It's a very strange verse, because in the next verse you see he's very confident. Before, he's also praying to God. He's confident that God will help him. And in the middle, he has this I don't want to say doubt, but he's amazed. It's like, wow, this is happening. Why is he so amazed? Obviously, Hashem listened to his prayer. So one interpretation is as follows. Eliezer obviously believes in God. That's why he's praying to God. Eliezer obviously believes that God could perform miracles, because according to the Medrash, he experienced some of the miracles with Abraham. There were battles against the four kings against the five kings, where Abraham and a very few people were able to overpower mighty kings. And then there are other miracles that the Medrash talks about, how in Abraham's early life, the kings tried to kill him because he was spreading monotheism, and God helped him. So Eliezer believes in God's ability to perform a miracle. That's not so surprising. What is unusual for him, and what is something that he was in doubt about, is something much deeper than a miracle. To see God's hand in natural events. In other words, could you see God and God's providence unfolding when there's no miracle? There's just chance. I happen to walk up to a girl, I say, can you give me water? If she gives me water, she'll be the one, right? So this is nothing unusual happened. So then he says, then what's surprising, in other words, what's surprising because it's not a common occurrence, is the ability to see Hashem within the daily interactions of people. And Hashem sending things your way that were meant to be for you. And that's something that he didn't necessarily experience in Abraham's house, because in Abraham's house, Abraham's a righteous person, and that's sort of a miraculous experience. But in the common interactions of people, to be able to sense Hashem and see that this is Hashem's plan unfolding, that was something he never experienced before. And that's what he's saying. And that's what he's surprised. Wow, is this indeed Hashem? Is Hashem operating through what seems to be a chance occurrence? In other words, do you see Hashem within nature, which just seems to be chance? And of course, the answer is yes. And that's what he recognizes. So that's step number one. Now we get back to our first question, which is, why is the story of Eliezer repeated in the Torah twice? And as the Medrash points out, this teaches that the stories of the servants of the patriarchs are more important than the Torah. How could anything be more important than the Torah? Torah is the God's wisdom. Torah is how we connect to Hashem. What could be more important than that? So here's where Hasidic philosophy says, Torah is very important. Torah is the way you connect to Hashem. But what part of you connects to Hashem when you study Torah? Your mind, your spiritual part, the spiritual part of yourself connects to Hashem. In some ways, the story of Eliezer is more important, because what the story of Eliezer is telling you is that Hashem is present, not necessarily in the study hall when you're contemplating, when you're thinking, and you're the more spiritual side of life, but Hashem is present in what seems to be a chance encounter. Hashem is present in day-to-day interactions of people. And that, in some ways, is more important because that's ultimately the idea that wherever you look, wherever you go, there is no place and there's no plane and there's no area that is separate from Hashem. So when the Medrash says that the stories of the patriarchs, the servants of the patriarchs are more important, it's not because it's more important. It's not that it's higher than the Torah. The point is like this. The point is the Torah, the fact that you connect to Hashem through Torah, that's obvious. The fact that you connect to Hashem through prayer, through contemplation, through spiritual matters, that's obvious. But the big idea here, and in some sense, that's the ultimate goal of the Torah, is to teach you that Hashem is present not only in the spiritual side of life, but also in the daily interactions. And when Hashem could lead you and you're at the water and you need something and you speak to this person and that person happens to be the right person. And there's a reason why you're meeting this person specifically. Just what we would call divine providence, Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence in just your daily activity to realize that nothing is by chance. It's very funny because the Hebrew word for chance, hakre, could mean chance, but it could also mean arranged. In other words, there really is no word that just means chance. It's an interesting word. Hakre. He asks Hashem, could you chance upon me that the girl that I meet should be the right girl? Which it doesn't mean chance, because if it's chance, then you're not asking Hashem to make the chance happen. So the point here is the bigger idea of the Torah is that you can find Hashem, and you can find Hashem directing you, not just in the Torah, but also in everyday activities, in everyday life. And that's the story that has to be amplified and told, because that's the less obvious story. And that's why he has to tell it to himself. He's surprised when he sees it himself. And then the Torah says how he has to tell the story, and he has to convince or show or present the facts to the relatives in a way that they will get the impression that it was indeed Hashem. And indeed, that's what happened. What the family says is Me Hashem Yatzah Hadavar. They said this matter came from Hashem, we can't interfere. This was obviously and clearly Hashem's hand. Now, the reason why they said it is it's because that's the way Eliezer said the story. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody else would say the story and you would come away with a different impression, right? Because you say, oh, it happened to be, I happened to meet this girl, it happened to be the nice one, nothing to do with God, right? But because of the way Eliezer says the story, and he says that there was a prayer, and I prayed, and then even before I finished the prayer, I saw this girl. So in other words, by telling the story in that way, first to himself, and then to Eliezer, and then to the family, you see that they got the message, and he got the message that this came from Hashem. And that's a bigger deal in some ways than Hashem conveying his wisdom through Torah, because that's obvious. But Hashem can direct you, not just to the Torah, and not just to the spiritual part of yourself, but also within the day-to-day interactions of human beings, and that to see the hand of God in the mundane activities and the mundane interactions, that is the greater message. That's the story that has to be repeated. That's the story that has to be amplified. So that's the big idea. Now, just to talk about this in a second from another angle, the same idea. Just to you talk about Yafa Sichatan, the Sicha, the talk, the story of the children of the servants of the patriarchs is better than the Torah of the children. That's the quote from the Medrash. Part of what is storytelling? What is telling a story? Telling a story is being able to see a plot within a series of events that don't seem connected necessarily, right? The difference between a few chance occurrences and telling a story is when you tell a story, you're basically weaving meaning through a bunch of events and saying this happened here and this happened there, and there's a unifying thread that makes this all part of a story, right? When you tell a story, one thing leads to the next. And when you tell a story, things that are not relevant to the plot, you leave out because it's not part of the story. So the ability of the servants of the patriarchs is the ability to tell a story and to see a story. To see a story means it's not just a series of events, but I see Hashem's hand leading me through all these events. And that's, I think, the big idea of this parsha, the idea of this parsha of why it's repeated, because again, Eliezer himself is surprised to learn that Hashem is present not only when there's a prophet, not only when he sends angels to convey information, but also when a person acts in a certain way to get a certain result. And Hashem can help them in a natural, very natural way, in what seems to be chance, and Hashem is present within what seems to be just the regular activities of people. That is the big idea. That's the message of Judaism. That's in some ways even greater than the story of the Torah of the children. Because the Torah of the children says, like I said, Hashem is present in spiritual matters. Hashem is present in the holy arena. That's good. That's important. But that doesn't have to be spelled out and told as a story. Because a story means the bigger idea is you have to help people understand, help people realize that Hashem is everywhere, including in the mundane interactions of people. So that, I think, is the story in short. I think that's an idea for itself. So maybe we'll stop here a few minutes early. Thank you all for joining. Comments, questions, as always, are welcome. Thank you all. Thank you for joining. Stop recording.